Hello students, welcome to Distinction Learning Platform, and in this video we're talking about Biology Paper 2 2025 Section B essay questions that talked about the menstrual cycle, and this is carrying about 6 marks. So before you begin answering this question, make sure that you comment, like the video, okay, as well as subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can support us. And in the comment section there will be a link that will take you to the website where you find other educational videos like other subjects and many other things. Okay, now let us start answering this question. So the question reads, describe the menstrual cycle in human beings with reference to the roles of hormones involved. Okay, so now they are saying we need to describe the menstrual cycle in reference to the hormones, because there are some hormones that are produced during what menstrual cycle. Okay, so before you begin this answering this, we need to understand things that you need to do before answering a question under essay questions. Okay, so before answering, you need to understand something. You will need to understand the main thing that they are talking about. So you need to describe the main thing that they are talking about. Here, if you come here, what are they talking about? So we need to identify the main subject here. What's the main subject? Menstrual cycle. So before you start also like answering anything, whether it's not this question, as long as you are under essay questions in biology, make sure that you identify the question that they are talking about in the question. If you identify that main subject, try to define that subject. Okay, so here in our case we're talking about the menstrual cycle. So that's the first thing. We're going to define the menstrual cycle, then we start going into details about menstrual cycle. So let us begin. What is menstrual cycle? So menstrual cycle, let us write something. We'll use this menstrual cycle. So we're saying menstrual cycle, you start defining like this. Menstrual cycle is the cycle that occurs in females, all right? In females, that takes about 28 days every month and involves the shedding of the, or let me just say, removal from the uterus. Okay, so that's the definition of the menstrual cycle. So we're saying menstrual cycle is a cycle that occurs in females. So make sure that you understand to say menstrual cycle is a cycle that happens or occurs in females, and it takes about 28 days every month. Okay, and what is the other important thing that you need to put? And involves the removal of blood from the uterus. So you find out to say those that have menstrual cycle, those females that experience menstrual cycle, basically they're going to shed blood. Okay, and it will take about 6 days for them. Okay, that will be menstruation, we'll talk about it. And or the whole cycle has to take about 28 days. So this is the basic thing. But the idea here is that if you are given a question under essay question, make sure that you describe or define something, the main subject. Then afterwards, that's when you start answering a question. Okay, now what we'll do here is this. Menstrual cycle, we need to have a diagram here so that we understand whatever is happening. If we understand whatever is happening, basically then that's when we'll write something here so that we understand. Otherwise, if I just wrote something here, you can't understand, all right? So let us write a diagram that will help us to understand the whole menstrual cycle. So let's say I'll just use a simple diagram. Okay, this is the pituitary gland. Okay, and this one. Okay, so basically this is the now female reproductive system. All right. Now, menstrual cycle is going to depend on some certain hormones that we'll talk about. So this is what we call a pituitary gland. Okay, so this is what we call the pituitary gland. Pituitary gland. Okay, this is what we call the pituitary gland, and these are what we call the ovaries. Or this is call it the ovary. Okay, so menstrual cycle, you need to remember to say it's going to involve two important endocrine glands. Okay, like what? The pituitary gland and the ovary. All right. So the first thing that the pituitary gland will do is it will produce what? It will produce the first important hormone, which we call follicle stimulating hormone. Okay, so we're just going to abbreviate something like that. Okay, FSH, will write in full here. So follicle stimulating hormone is the first thing that we'll do, and it's the first thing that we'll write here. Okay, the pituitary gland firstly is going to produce the follicle stimulating hormone that will go to the what? The ovaries here. Okay, it will go to the ovary, the pituitary, the follicle stimulating hormone. Now, in the ovaries, remember, what can you find in the ovaries? You can find the eggs, or the ovules. Okay, so what's going to happen is that this follicle stimulating hormone will come here, will come to the ovaries, and it will come here and stimulate the ovaries to start now to make sure that there is a production of follicle, the Graafian follicles. So this follicle stimulating hormone will come to the ovaries and tell the ovaries to say, now start making the Graafian follicles. So it will get one egg here and turn into what we call the Graafian follicle. Okay, so this is what we call the Graafian follicle. The Graafian follicle. Again, what's the first thing that's going to happen? The pituitary gland will produce follicle stimulating hormone that will stimulate the ovaries so that these eggs can start developing in what we call the Graafian follicle. We can write that, right? Okay, so let us write it here. So what we are saying here is the pituitary gland produces what? Follicle stimulating hormone. Follicle stimulating hormone. That does what? That goes to the ovaries and stimulates production, or this has not production, this has say development of the Graafian follicles. So this is now where we are. All right, so make sure that you pay attention. So that's the first thing, the first step. The next, what will happen is that these Graafian follicles that have been developed, they're going to start, they will make sure that they are going to ripen and the ovulation is going to be possible. Now, what's the other thing that is important for you that you need to understand is that these Graafian follicles, they have that ability to start producing other hormones or sex hormones. You need to understand. So what they will do is, since they are developing and they are becoming ripened, they will start producing something here. Okay, they will produce something, they will produce what we call estrogen. They will produce what we call estrogen. Okay, so this estrogen now will go here. What we call this? This is what we call the uterus. Okay, this part now, this is what we call the uterus. So the estrogen will go to the uterus and stimulate the development of the uterus. So what is the second thing that we need to talk about? We need to say the Graafian follicles produces estrogen that will go to the uterus and stimulate the development of the uterus. Alright? So the next thing that we can say here is, now these Graafian follicles that were developed, Graafian follicles, yes, what did we say? Produces now estrogen that goes to the uterus and promotes the building up of the walls of the uterus. So this is what we are saying. Okay, that's the next step. So we're just following step by step. So we are saying here, this Graafian follicles produces estrogen that will go to the uterus and promote the building up of the walls of the uterus. Why doing like that? Because in case implantation happens, that's where now the fetus is going to what? To develop from. So we're going step by step. Now next. So since this is happening now, after this, the pituitary gland will also do something. Also produce another hormone. You need to understand. So initially it produced this follicle stimulating hormone, but now it will produce what we call luteinizing hormone. Luteinizing hormone. Let's just say LH. Luteinizing hormone. Okay, so this luteinizing hormone, what is it going to do? It will be produced by the pituitary gland as well. It will go to the ovaries as well. Now it will do something that is different. Remember that follicle stimulating hormone just stimulated the production or the development of the Graafian follicles, but this one is going to do something different. It's going to promote what we call ovulation. So what's going to happen is this. So what's going to happen is this. Remember that this is the Graafian follicle that was what? Now that was developing. Now, if luteinizing hormone reaches the Graafian follicle that has developed, then what's going to happen? It will make sure that this Graafian follicle burst and release an egg inside. Remember that the Graafian follicles, they are going to have an egg inside there. Okay? So now, if the luteinizing hormone goes to the Graafian follicle, then it will make sure that the Graafian follicle bursts and release an egg from inside. So this egg is going to be released into the fallopian tube. What we call this? We call it ovulation. So in simpler terms, what we're saying is luteinizing hormone stimulates ovulation. So here it's going to stimulate what? Ovulation. So we can write that point. Okay. So we're going to say now the pituitary gland. What did we say? The pituitary gland produces what? Produces luteinizing hormone. Luteinizing hormone. So this is what we said. Okay, luteinizing hormone that promotes ovulation. This is what we said. That's promote what? Ovulation. Okay? Again, it's a step by step. Now, after ovulation happens, Remember that this egg now has been released in the fallopian tube. Now this one, there will be an egg. So this, let me explain something that is happening. Remember what we're saying. If this is the Graafian follicle and there is an egg inside there, so what's going to happen is that if luteinizing hormone comes like that, okay, it will stimulate the bursting of this Graafian follicle. This is a Graafian follicle, okay, and this egg is going to be what? Produced outside. Remember that if the egg is being produced inside here, it will be empty. So the Graafian follicle is going to be empty. Now that empty Graafian follicle, we're not going to call it Graafian follicle, we'll change the name because there is no egg inside. If there is no egg inside, we're going to call it another name, which we call corpus luteum. Okay, so we're saying here we're going to call it what? Corpus luteum. Okay, reason why we're calling it corpus luteum, because it is a Graafian follicle that does not contain an egg inside. Okay, then we're going to call it corpus luteum. Okay, so this is corpus luteum. So let us write that point. Okay, after ovulation happens, since now ovulation has happened, the egg is not inside the Graafian follicle, what do you think is going to happen? The corpus luteum is formed. So corpus luteum is what? Formed. Now, what is the function of this corpus luteum that is formed? It produces what? That produces another hormone. Remember that estrogen was produced by the Graafian follicle. Now here, we don't have the Graafian follicle to produce estrogen. Now, the corpus luteum is the one now that will start producing another hormone. Remember that in females, there are two important hormones. There is estrogen and progesterone. So the corpus luteum is going to start producing progesterone. Okay, so that produces progesterone and continues building up the walls of the uterus. So it's going to continue the same role of estrogen. So building up the walls of the uterus. Okay, so that's what happens. So let us continue. So I said this is now the corpus luteum. This corpus luteum is going to produce now another important hormone, which we call progesterone. And this progesterone will also stimulate the uterus to start building up the walls of the uterus. In case implantation happens, now there will be a favorable environment in the uterus for the fetus to come and develop from there. So that's what's going to happen. The next now, what will happen is that now you say this is an egg that was what produced from this Graafian follicle. It is within the fallopian tube. Now, in case there is no fertilization that's going to happen, this egg that was produced, so let us represent this egg in blue. Okay, if this is the egg that was produced, it will come here. It will just continue its journey up until it comes out. Why is it doing that? Because there is no fertilization. Okay, there is no fertilization that has occurred. If there is no fertilization that has occurred, now what will start happening is that these walls of the uterus will start breaking down. Okay, they will start breaking down. Reason being because now the fertilization did not occur. So now the breaking down of the walls of the uterus, that's what we call menstruation. Okay, so now let us write the last important point. So what we're saying is that now since everything has happened, now we are going to say in case you say now you talk about the fertilization. In case fertilization does not occur, okay, menstruation will begin, characterized by what? The breaking down of the walls of the uterus. So characterized by breaking down of the walls of the uterus. Breaking down, okay, of the walls of the uterus. Okay, so this is what will happen now. So we're saying if the egg continues like that because fertilization did not occur, now the breaking down of the uterus will occur, and what do we call that? We call it menstruation. Okay, and it will take about 3 to 6 days. Okay, it has to occur 3 to 6 days. So that's the duration of that bleeding that most of the females experiences. All right. Now, the last thing that we need to talk about is that the moment blood comes out, because menstruation is occurring, now the cycle will begin again. So after this happens, you say, now the cycle, after all these events, after all these events, the cycle begins again. So this is what we call 6 marks. Now let us read the answer now. Now what did I say the first thing? The first thing I said to say, make sure that you describe the what? The main subject that you've been given. Okay? What is menstruation? Menstrual cycle. Menstrual cycle, we said it is a cycle that occurs in females that takes about 28 days every month and involves the removal of blood from the uterus. Okay? That's the definition that we said. Now we go to the answer. The pituitary gland, okay? The pituitary gland produces follicle stimulating hormone that goes to your ovaries and stimulates development of the Graafian follicles. Okay, step by step. Then these Graafian follicles produces estrogen that goes to the uterus and promote the building up of the walls of the uterus. Okay, and promote the building up of the walls of the what? Uterus. Alright. Then the pituitary gland produces luteinizing hormone that promotes ovulation. The corpus luteum, this one is formed, that produces progesterone and continues building up the walls of the uterus. Okay. Then the last important point that you need to take note is that in case fertilization does not occur, menstruation will begin, characterized by the breaking down of the walls of the uterus. Then after all these events, the cycle begins again. So this is how you can answer such a question. Okay, make sure that you study more. Until next time.